fascinating. Now, we've had 4 really interesting presentations. I won't take advantage of my right as moderator to ask the first question, because I think we should have the first any questions to Khadija, because she can't stay with us very long, and I hope she's still with us. I think she is. Any questions to her, please let us know. Valentina.
Khadija, did I take it right that humanitarian right was provided to people on the border only by CSOs, but the governments failed to do so? No, they assisted us in documenting the border crosses, but they did that very slowly. They did not try their best, and they seemed not to care that people were spending their nights in the open air and were sleeping rough. But humanitarian aid, that is water, clothing, food, was provided by international donors. And as you said, all of them started to provide such help. They asked us about the needs and about what they could do to help us, so they couldn't stay on the side and just watch it. So they would come to the ground and distribute this help, this aid. But we did have certain support from the border guards, and they saw that the tensions was growing, they were escalating, and our lawyers came to talk to our people, and they understood that people were on the brink of an eruption. Just they were very distressed.
Thank you. Could I ask a question? I have a question to all of the speakers, really. We are now in the second wave. And we've heard some very graphic descriptions of what was happening in the first wave, particularly. How is the second wave in comparison to the first wave back in April last year? Are things worse now, or are systems now better organized?
If I may start, Janet, the situation is grave in terms of infections. It neither improved nor deteriorated. Disease is a disease. Now we have a new surge, but we've come to know how to live under those circumstances. We know how to respond in the situations when people have nowhere to live, or when people contract an infection and they should be isolated. So we have now the mechanism in place to provide assistance and support to it. We are getting accustomed to working under such conditions. We've got fewer applications and fewer reports about the numbers of infected migrants. I think that the majority of people in the risk group just left Russia because migrants took their elderly women and children back home. And those who still reside here are physically stronger people. We receive reports on the numbers of the infected migrants, but not as many as in April, say, or in May. Just a couple of cases per week today. So, and we've come to live with this pandemic, and we were so proactive in the spring that now the authorities are more responsive to our complaints, to our requests and demands, and we now know how to quickly arrange certain assistance. And when we get reports about some detentions, for example, by the police. Now we are ready to provide food or medicines to them if they need medicines. Now we've got the system of courier deliveries, thanks to the pandemic. This network of courier deliveries has improved immensely in Moscow.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments?
My question is to Daniel, and it's rather a comment than a question. Any emergency help to or aid to migrants is envisioned by law, but it doesn't mean that you can get it in practice. In order to get such aid, you have to call to the law enforcement, or you can threat that you will complain to the police or to the prosecutor's office. Then they start providing this emergency aid, or will be sending ambulances. Yesterday, we had an elderly migrant woman hospitalized. She has got diabetes and she's got COVID, and she's got high pressure, blood pressure running. And we had to take her to several hospitals, and they denied admission. And only when we called the police officer saying that we will be documenting your denial of assistance to a person in critical condition, did they agree to admit her. And with coronavirus, the situation deteriorated because we had more than 600 denials for patients with the saturation of under 40%. So oxygen saturation, I mean, of blood. So we cannot say that it's not a problem. It is. So it doesn't depend on whether the migrant is documented or undocumented. It depends on their names. And if they see that they are migrants, the hospitals would not respond. And then I, Chupik, tell to the providers that I will complain to the prosecutor's office.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have BEARR would like to ask a question. Can you unmute yourself?
Good afternoon, dear participants of the webinar. I'm Radar Mirzaev. I represent Fergana Center for Civic Initiative Support. And it is a beneficiary of trust fund. And we work within the project of improving assistance to domestic violence victims. And it was great to listen to all of you. And I would like to comment on the following thing. You've spoken a lot about the labor migrants problems who stay in the host country. I can tell you what occurs when they return to the country of origin, when large actually transportation was organized for them, and from Volsky to Tashkent, flights are organized or arranged, trains taking them back to our country. Once they turn up in their country, they get in a similar situation. I won't tell you that they are oppressed by the police or that they are denied medical assistance, but they still have no jobs, and they used to have jobs in the host country. As a result, they feel depressed because at home, in their own country, physically staying in their country, they cannot provide for their families. They cannot be breadwinners for their families. Thus, we see just spikes in domestic violence cases as a result, because returnees, migrants who come back, have forgotten how to be with their families. They are accustomed to living far from their families, and now they're locked in some narrow space with their spouses, with their children. They can't find common language with them. They don't know how to communicate with them. They perceive themselves as breadwinners, and that is it, not as family members. And now we have to provide a psychological counseling to them, training them in how to live in their own families. And we have to actually think of how to provide some food rations, food packages to them, or handouts to them, retrain them so that they can be placed in jobs with some new skills. So this pandemic has exposed the lack of pre-migration training and post-migration reintegration services. And these two should be well related. Now that we are experiencing the second wave, the borders of the Russian Federation are closed. Kazakhstan's borders are also closed. And the people who planned to go to Russia, for example, to earn money there, stay at home. And because of that, they are depressed and they become more aggressive. And though people who still are in the Russian Federation and who would like to go back to their countries also suffer, all of that leads us to start providing counseling, psychological counseling. And when you work with migrants, you should be paying attention to that.
Thank you very much.
So that they are adjusted.
This is a very important aspect of the situation, and I'm very grateful to you for telling us what's going on back home in the countries of origin of the migrants. Thank you. Now, for those who can still stay a few more minutes with us, we have a question from Agnieszka Kubal.
Hello, Agnieszka Kubal. Thank you so much for this beautiful seminar. I'm Agnieszka Kubal. I'm a lecturer at the School of Slavonic and East European Studies at UCL. У меня вопрос к Валентине.
I've got a question to Valentina. It's a legal question. How do you address the issue of conflicts of law? On the one hand, you've got the presidential decree that migrants cannot be deported or expelled during the pandemic. On the other hand, though, all services like the police, migrant services check their IDs, their migration cards, their registration. So what should these people do if they haven't got the migration card, they haven't got a Moscow registration that would be valid for this period? When I lived in and worked in Moscow, I observed such cases when people were sent to court, were under administrative arrest, and they were sent to court, and then they were expelled or deported. Now they are detained, and what then? They are let go. So Valentina, that's a question to you. What happens then? And one more question, if I may. I was extremely impressed with your pictures from the airport, people sleeping on the floor in droves. Did any legal professionals try to help them? Because there is a resolution of the judgment of the European Court for Human Rights when a person was detained in the transit zone of the airport. And that's Article 3 of EECCA on inhumane treatment, right? Just your first question, Agnieszka, it is as it used to be. They are taken to court and sometimes not even to courts, but rather in the yard or in the courtyard. They would be waiting for 5 hours, after which the aide to the judge will bring the judgment on their deportation. And they come with those judgments to us. We write appeals and we file those appeals to courts, and those appeals are sustained. So in October we had 155 overruled deportations, actually. So, and thus we had several thousand such cases. And when you drive by the courthouse and you see crowds of people there, they are not let in because of the quarantine. So the bailiff says, go away. And I go to the police officers and I ask them to let migrants go. And that's what's happening, just the exact situation that you remember. Now, speaking about the human rights of migrants, for one thing, most of the people who stayed there, they were not in the transit zone. They were in the waiting halls, in the actually departure area, and they stayed there voluntarily of their free will. And I felt pity for them, and I took my salary and went and bought some food and water for them. But we had to feed about 1,000 people on a daily basis. Can you imagine? You needed at least 1,000 euro for that on a daily basis. So we spent our own money for to do that. Those who stayed in the transit zone, we found two Turkmen people who stayed there from the 15th March till the 22nd March, and they were never fed during that week. They spent all their money, and then they just started making calls to other organizations rather than the Turkmen embassy, because Turkmen embassy would not answer their calls. So they contacted us, and we made sure that they were fed in that transit zone. Of course, it is violation of human rights, but what can we do with that? Turkey did not accept them, and rightfully so. Russia would not let them in because the borders were closed. Of course, we can be fighting for certain redress to them, but unfortunately, migrants are not prepared to live through the long-lasting court proceedings. And now we have a case against Utera, and we have about 600 applicants to Utera. And we filed this actually case. We started with 110 people, and more and more people come back, and UTER would not return the money. They recognize that our claim is legitimate, but they do not refund those tickets. And the migrants do not insist. They say, okay, Allah will punish them. So they pin their hopes on Allah rather than on the authorities.
Thank you, Valentina. Thank you very much. I think we've just got a couple of minutes, but Daniel has a question.
Well, I have a brief comment on what Valentina said about migrants' access to healthcare.
Valentina, I would like to tell you that you are right. The number of violations is huge, and we can hardly speak about true access to emergency medical aid for migrants. But the situation with COVID is unique in that at least under the law, they can get emergency medical aid because it's respiratory disease. And whereas TB is not a reason for deportation, you should remember that. So it's notable because otherwise people find themselves in the street, and sometime later they start infectious as well, to be contagious as well. So for the dialogue with the authorities, it is important. And a lot of migrants got medical aid and got treatment, and we should recognize it. But I do agree there is an issue.
Thank you very much. We've had a really interesting set of questions and presentations. I think we have to let our presenters go, and our very kind interpreter also, who I would like to thank very warmly for her work. So unless there are any really urgent last questions, which I don't see any blue hands up, thank you all again, and thank you for joining in, those who did. We've had some questions about access to the presentations. If our speakers agree, we will post them in PDF form on our website, but I shall check with each of them first, and then people will be able to access them as a PDF. Thank you all very much, and have a good evening, day, whatever time it is, wherever you live. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.